Mercedes didn't just win the first 2 races of the season. They crushed everyone. Front row lockouts, perfect execution, and a gap that makes no sense on paper. Because here's what nobody could explain. Ferrari was just as fast in the corners, sometimes even better. And yet, on the straights, Mercedes pulled away like they had something extra, something hidden, something the data couldn't fully expose. Until now. Because just days before the Japanese Grand Prix, the FIA dropped a bombshell. Not a penalty, not an investigation, a rule change. They admitted there was a loophole in the engine regulations, a gap big enough to change performance without breaking the rules. And if Mercedes found it first, then what you're about to hear explains why no team has been able to catch them. Why Australia wasn't a coincidence. Why China confirmed the pattern. And why Suzuka might reveal something even bigger. Because if this is true, then Mercedes isn't just ahead. They're playing a completely different game. Subscribe now, because the most important detail is the one nobody is talking about yet. Right after Australia, the first signs appeared. Not obvious at first, but impossible to ignore once you looked closer. Because Mercedes didn't just win. They controlled the race. Every lap felt calculated. Every move felt intentional. There was no struggle. No unpredictability. Just precision. And that's what made people uncomfortable. Because in Formula 1, dominance usually has a weakness. Something you can point at. Straight line speed. Tire degradation. Corner instability. Something. But Mercedes had none of it. They were fast in slow corners. Stable in high speed. Efficient on the straights. And more importantly, consistent. Lap after lap. Sector after sector. And here's where things get serious. The gap in Australia wasn't small. It was massive. Over 8/10 in qualifying to Ferrari. That's not a normal advantage. That's control. But then came China. And this is where most people got it wrong. Because on paper, the gap got smaller. It looked like Ferrari was catching up. Like the field was closing in. But that's not what actually happened. The advantage didn't disappear. It changed. And that detail changes everything. Because in China, Mercedes wasn't faster everywhere. They were faster exactly where it mattered. Through the technical section, Ferrari was right there. Competitive, sharp, confident. But the moment the cars hit the long straight, the difference appeared. Instantly. Not gradual. Not explainable by setup alone. It was like a switch. And that tells you something critical. Mercedes wasn't just faster. They were choosing where to be faster. And in a season defined by energy limits, that's not just performance. That's control at a level the rest of the grid hasn't reached yet. But here's the part nobody expected. Some of the fastest cars in the speed traps were not the Mercedes Works cars. They were customer teams, using the same engine. Which shouldn't make sense. Unless top speed isn't the real weapon. Unless the real advantage is everything that happens before and after that number. Acceleration. Energy deployment. How the car carries speed without losing it. And suddenly, this isn't about raw power anymore. It's about intelligence. And that's when the question started. Because if Mercedes isn't just faster, if they're smarter with how they use performance, then what exactly did they figure out? That no one else did? And more importantly, is it something the rules never fully controlled? Because that question is what forced the FIA to look closer. The moment the FIA started looking closer, everything changed. Because this wasn't just paddock gossip anymore. This wasn't just teams complaining behind closed doors. This became official. And when the FIA speaks, everyone listens. But here's the key detail most people missed. They didn't accuse Mercedes of cheating. They didn't say anything was illegal. Instead, they admitted something else. Something far more revealing. The rules themselves had a gap. A very specific one. Hidden in how engine performance is measured. Because the regulation was clear about one thing. The compression ratio. A fixed limit. 16:1. Simple. Defined. But only under certain conditions. Cold conditions. Static testing. Controlled environments. And that's where the entire situation starts to unravel. Because a Formula 1 engine doesn't operate like that. Not on track. Not under race conditions. It runs hot. Extremely hot. Under constant stress. Pushing limits every second. And according to what the FIA acknowledged, there were ways for performance to behave differently in those real conditions. Ways that weren't fully covered by the original wording. And that's the moment everything clicked? Because if an engine can pass every test perfectly, but deliver something extra when it actually matters, then you're no longer dealing with a violation. You're dealing with optimization. Precision engineering at the edge of legality. And that's exactly what made rival teams nervous. Because you can't protest something that follows the rules, even if it gives a clear advantage. And that's why pressure started building. Not publicly at first, but internally. Manufacturers pushing, questioning, demanding clarity. Because if this wasn't addressed quickly, the gap could become permanent, locked in before anyone had time to react. And the FIA responded. Not with penalties, not with investigations, with a change. They updated how compression would be measured. Not just in controlled conditions anymore, but also when the engine is running hot, under real operating temperatures. Exactly where performance differences actually appear. And that single decision tells you everything. Because rule changes like this don't happen unless something already forced them. But here's the part that should worry every team on the grid. This change doesn't erase what Mercedes has already built. It doesn't reset the season. It doesn't suddenly remove their advantage overnight. Because whatever they discovered, it's already inside the car, inside the system, inside the way they deploy energy, manage balance, and control races. And that means something very uncomfortable. Even if the loophole is closed, the understanding remains, the knowledge remains. And in Formula One, that's the real advantage. Which raises the question no one can answer yet. How much of Mercedes' dominance comes from this? And how much comes from something even deeper? Because if there's another layer, something no one has identified yet, then what we're about to see in Japan might confirm a much bigger reality. One that goes beyond a loophole. One that defines an entire era. And if that's true, then Suzuka isn't just the next race. It's the moment everything becomes clear. And this is where Suzuka changes everything. Because up until now, there's always been an explanation. Australia was unique. China had a long straight. Different tracks. Different characteristics. Different excuses. But Suzuka removes all of that. This is a circuit that exposes the truth. High-speed corners. Rapid direction changes. No room for imbalance. No place to hide weaknesses. If a car isn't perfectly connected, it shows immediately. And that's why this race matters more than the first two combined. Because if Mercedes delivers the same performance here, then it's no longer about a clever interpretation of the rules. It's no longer about a possible loophole. It becomes something much harder to accept. Complete superiority. But here's where the pressure builds. Every team now knows what the FIA confirmed. They know where the suspicion was. They understand the area. Compression. Energy behavior. Deployment timing. But knowing that doesn't mean they can fix it. Because what Mercedes has built isn't just a faster engine. It's a complete system. A way of operating the car as a single unit. Engine and battery working together. Aerodynamics supporting stability. Drivers extracting confidence, not fighting the car. And software making decisions faster than any human can react. All of it connected. All of it synchronized. And that kind of integration can't be copied in a week. It can't be solved between races. It takes time. It takes understanding. And right now, Mercedes has both. Which creates a gap that's bigger than lap time. Because this isn't just about speed. It's about certainty. When a Mercedes driver exits a corner, they know exactly what the car will do. No surprises. No hesitation. And that changes everything. Because confidence creates performance. And performance creates dominance. But here's the part that should worry everyone. What if the FIA change doesn't actually slow them down? What if it only confirms that Mercedes was never relying on just one advantage? Because the evidence is already there. Australia showed full control. China showed targeted efficiency. Two completely different challenges. Same result. And that points to something deeper. Something structural. Something that doesn't disappear with a rule clarification. Which means Suzuka isn't just another race. It's a test of reality. Because if Mercedes arrives, and nothing changes, then the conclusion becomes unavoidable. This isn't temporary. This isn't circumstantial. This is the foundation of a dominant era. And if that's confirmed, then the real question is no longer who wins in Japan. It's how long it takes before anyone can even get close. And that answer might already be unfolding right in front of us. And yet, even with everything we've just uncovered, there's still one detail that doesn't fully make sense. Because if this was only about a loophole, if this was just about compression or testing conditions, then the advantage should look simple, predictable, limited to one area. But it doesn't. It never has. And that's the part that should make every team nervous. Because what Mercedes is doing works everywhere. Australia exposed full lap dominance. China revealed selective efficiency. And now Suzuka is about to test something even more important. Sustainability. Not of reliability, but of control. Because over a full race distance, on a circuit that punishes even the smallest imbalance, there's nowhere to hide. No straight long enough to mask weakness. No corner slow enough to recover mistakes. Everything is connected. Everything matters. And if Mercedes still looks untouchable here, then the final piece falls into place. Because at that point, you're not looking at a technical advantage anymore. You're looking at a philosophy. A completely different way of understanding this new era. Where energy is not just used, it's orchestrated. Where performance is not just extracted, it's distributed. Exactly where it matters most. Lap after lap. Corner after corner. And here's where it becomes almost impossible to stop. Because once a team reaches that level of understanding, they don't just stay ahead. They evolve faster. Every update becomes more effective. Every adjustment becomes more precise. Because they already know where the limit is. And more importantly, how to operate right on it. Which creates a gap that doesn't just grow. It compounds. Race after race. Weekend after weekend. And suddenly, catching them isn't just difficult. It's unrealistic. But here's the final question. The one everything has been building toward. What if the FIA didn't just confirm a loophole? What if they confirmed something much bigger? What if, without saying it directly, they revealed that Mercedes understood the new regulations before anyone else even realized where to look? Because if that's true, then this isn't about one season. It's not about one technical detail. It's about the beginning of a cycle. A period of dominance that could define this entire era of Formula One. And Suzuka is the moment we find out if that future has already started.